loyalty, love, and patience are virtues we often associate with humans, but sometimes animals remind us of their incredible capacity for these emotions. Today, we'll explore the heartwarming yet bittersweet story of a dog whose unwavering faith in his owner became a testament to the strength of the bond they shared. For 10 years, he waited, day after day through rain, snow, and sunshine, hoping to see the face of the person he loved the most. This isn't just a story about a dog. It's a story about the power of devotion that transcends time and circumstances. So, grab some tissues, because what you're about to hear will leave you deeply moved. To truly understand the depth of this dog's loyalty, we must go back to the beginning, to a small, peaceful town nestled in the countryside. It was here that a man named Jacob found Max, a scruffy little puppy with big, hopeful eyes, abandoned near an old railway station. Jacob wasn't looking for a pet, but something about Max struck a chord in his heart. Without a second thought, he scooped the pup into his arms and took him home. From that day forward, Max became more than just a pet. He was Jacob's shadow, following him wherever he went. Whether it was early morning walks through the golden fields or quiet evenings by the fireplace, the two were inseparable. Jacob often joked that Max wasn't just his dog. He was his best friend, his confidant, the one being who truly understood him. Max, in turn, adored Jacob with every fiber of his being. When Jacob laughed, Max wagged his tail furiously. When Jacob was sad, Max would rest his head on his lap, offering silent comfort. Life was simple, but it was filled with love. Together, they built a bond so strong that nothing, at least that's what they believed, could ever break it. But life has a way of testing even the strongest of bonds. And for Max and Jacob, that test was just around the corner. One fateful day, everything changed. Jacob received news that would turn his world upside down. A family emergency had arisen, and he needed to leave the town immediately to care for an ailing relative in a distant city. It wasn't just a short trip. Jacob knew he'd be gone for a long time, and taking Max with him wasn't an option. The decision broke Jacob's heart. He arranged for a neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, a kind elderly woman who adored Max, to care for him while he was away. On the morning of his departure, Jacob knelt beside Max, running his fingers through the dog's soft fur. "You'll be back soon, boy," Jacob said, his voice trembling. "Be a good boy and stay with Mrs. Thompson. I promise we'll be together again." Max wagged his tail, his eyes gleaming with trust and love, unaware of the journey ahead. Jacob stood, hesitated for a moment, and then walked out the door with his suitcase in hand. Max followed him to the gate, watching intently as Jacob's figure grew smaller and smaller in the distance. What Jacob didn't realize was that Max had no intention of waiting in someone else's home. The bond they shared was too deep. As the days turned into weeks, Mrs. Thompson noticed that Max would sneak out every morning and head toward the train station, the very spot where he'd last seen Jacob. At first, the neighbors thought it was temporary. "Hell, get used to Jacob being away," they said. But Max had other plans. Each morning, he would trot to the station and sit by the tracks, scanning the faces of passengers, hoping to see the one person he was waiting for. Max didn't understand why Jacob wasn't returning. All he knew was that he had to be there, waiting, because one day Jacob would come back. And so, Max's daily vigil at the train station began. Every morning, as the sun painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Max would leave Mrs. Thompson's yard and make his way to the station. He would find a spot near the platform, his ears perked up. eyes scanning every face that stepped off the train. The station was always bustling, commuters rushing to work, families arriving for visits, travelers passing through. But amidst the chaos, Max sat quietly, a symbol of unyielding patience. Some passengers began to notice the lone dog day after day, sitting in the same spot. A few would offer him a pat on the head or a scrap of food, but Max's attention never wavered. He was waiting for only one person. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Max's vigil became a fixture at the station. Rain or shine, snow or sleet, he would be there. His fur often damp from rain or dusted with snow. The station staff grew fond of him. They would sometimes bring him water or a warm blanket during colder months, touched by his quiet determination. To them, Max wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder of what it meant to love unconditionally. His presence sparked conversations among strangers. "Who is he waiting for?" they'd ask. "How long has he been coming here?" For Max, the passage of time didn't matter. Days blended into weeks, but his faith never faltered. To him, Jacob's return was not a matter of if, it was a matter of when. Even when the seasons changed and the town transformed, Max remained. The station became his second home. The once scruffy pup had grown into a weathered but noble dog, his eyes still filled with hope every time a train pulled into the station. Max's unwavering loyalty didn't go unnoticed. The locals began to see him not just as a stray dog, but as a symbol of hope and devotion. People passing through the station would often stop to ask about him. Who does he belong to? Why does he sit here every day? The station staff and townsfolk would share Max's story, and soon he became a local legend. A small group of residents started taking care of Max. Mrs. Thompson, who still considered herself his caretaker, would bring him food, while the station workers provided him with water and a cozy spot to rest. Passengers who heard his story would leave treats, blankets, and even little notes wishing him luck. "This dog is remarkable," an elderly man said one day, watching Max from afar. "We could all learn something about loyalty from him." Eventually, Max's story spread beyond the town. A journalist traveling through heard about the dog who waited at the station every day and decided to write an article about him. The piece was published in a local newspaper and later picked up by a national outlet. Soon, Max was no longer just a local legend. He became a symbol of loyalty and love for people far and wide. Donations poured in from strangers who wanted to ensure Max was cared for. Animal lovers sent supplies, and some even offered to adopt him. But Max wasn't interested in new homes or new families. He had only one mission: to wait for Jacob. Despite the growing attention and offers of help, Max remained steadfast in his routine. Every morning, he would make his way to the station, and every evening he would return to Mrs. Thompson's yard, his faith unshaken. His story inspired people in ways he couldn't possibly understand. For the townsfolk, Max wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder of the beauty of unconditional love and the strength of a promise kept, even in the face of uncertainty. Though Max's spirit was unbreakable, his journey was not without challenges. Over the years, he faced countless hardships that would have discouraged even the strongest of hearts. The changing seasons brought new trials. In the sweltering heat of summer, Max would pant heavily as he sat by the station, his tongue lolling out in exhaustion. Some days, the sun beat down mercilessly, and the pavement became unbearably hot under his paws. Concerned locals would bring him bowls of water, but Max often drank sparingly, his focus always on the trains. When autumn arrived, the chill in the air was soon replaced by the biting cold of winter. Snow fell in heavy blankets, covering the station platform. On some days, the wind howled so fiercely that it stung his face and left icicles hanging from his fur. Yet Max didn't waver. He would curl up tightly to conserve warmth, his eyes never leaving the tracks. The station workers gave him an old crate filled with blankets, but Max only used it at night. During the day, he refused to leave his post. Then came the rains. Torrential downpours soaked him to the bone, but Max endured, his head held high as he scanned the faces of passengers. Despite the physical toll, he never let his spirit falter. But it wasn't just the weather that tested him. Time was perhaps the cruelest adversary of all. As the years rolled by, Max grew older. His once vibrant coat became speckled with gray, and his movements slowed. There were days when his legs ached too much to move quickly, and yet he still dragged himself to the station, driven by a love that was stronger than his pain. Sometimes, on especially quiet nights, the station workers would notice Max staring into the distance, his gaze filled with a hint of sorrow. Was he beginning to doubt? Was he starting to lose hope? No one knew for sure. What they did know, however, was that Max's resilience in the face of such trials was nothing short of extraordinary. Each day that he showed up, despite the obstacles, was a testament to his undying devotion. His story became a beacon of inspiration, reminding everyone that even in the hardest of times, love and loyalty can carry us through. 10 long years had passed since Jacob walked out of Max's life. 10 years of waiting, hoping, and enduring. For the people in the town, Max's vigil had become a part of their daily lives. But for Max, it was still a deeply personal mission, a promise that he had yet to fulfill. One sunny morning, as Max sat in his usual spot by the platform, the sound of an approaching train echoed through the station. It was an ordinary day, no different from the thousands of others he had spent waiting. Yet something was different. As the train screeched to a halt and passengers began disembarking, Max's ears perked up. His tired eyes scanned the crowd, moving from face to face, as they always did. And then, in the midst of the bustling platform, Max froze. A familiar figure stepped onto the platform, a man, slightly older, his face weathered by time, but his gait unmistakable. It was Jacob. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Max's body trembled as he stood up, his tail wagging furiously. A deep, guttural bark escaped his throat, a sound filled with a decade of longing, hope, and love. Jacob stopped in his tracks, his eyes locking onto Max. He dropped his bag, his face a mixture of shock and overwhelming emotion. "Max," he whispered, his voice cracking. Before Jacob could take another step, Max was bounding toward him. His legs, frail with age, carried him with a renewed strength born of pure joy. When he reached Jacob, he leapt up, his paws landing on Jacob's chest as his tail wagged uncontrollably. Tears streamed down Jacob's face as he wrapped his arms around Max, burying his face in the dog's fur. "I'm so sorry, boy," Jacob sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave you for so long." Max didn't care about apologies. For him, the moment he had waited for all these years had finally arrived. He licked Jacob's face, his barks transforming into soft whimpers as if to say, "You're here." That's all that matters. The station fell silent as onlookers watched the reunion, many with tears in their eyes. It was a moment that transcended words, a reunion that spoke to the deepest parts of the human and animal heart. Jacob spent the next hour sitting on the platform with Max, holding him close and telling him everything that had happened. He explained how life had pulled him away longer than he had ever expected, and how he had returned as soon as he could. For Max, none of it mattered anymore. His wait was over. His faith had been rewarded. The man he loved was finally home. After their emotional reunion, Jacob knew he could never let Max out of his sight again. He took Max home, back to the same house where their story had begun all those years ago. Though Max was older now, his spirit seemed to rejuvenate in Jacob's presence. The two of them fell back into their familiar rhythm, walking through the fields together and spending quiet evenings by the fire. But Max's years of waiting had taken their toll. His body, though still full of life, was frailer than it once was. Jacob, recognizing the depth of his dog's sacrifice, dedicated himself to giving Max the most love-filled years he had left. He spoiled Max with treats, soft beds, and all the affection he could muster. Every day was a celebration of their bond, a bond that had withstood the test of time. Meanwhile, Max's story continued to inspire people far beyond the town. Journalists and animal lovers shared the tale of the dog who waited for 10 years, and the story spread like wildfire. Max became a global symbol of loyalty, reminding people of the power of unconditional love. A local artist even created a statue of Max, which was placed near the station where he had waited so faithfully. The statue captured Max in his signature pose, sitting patiently, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Beneath it, an inscription read, "Loyalty that knows no bounds. In honor of Max, the dog who waited." Tourists began visiting the station just to see the spot where Max had waited. They would leave flowers, notes, and even small treats as tributes to the dog who had touched their hearts. For Jacob, seeing how much Max's story had inspired others filled him with pride. He often said, "I don't deserve him, but Max reminds me every day of what love really means." Max's remaining years were spent in peace and happiness, surrounded by the person he loved most. Though his time eventually came, his legacy lived on, not just in the statue, but in the hearts of everyone who had heard his story. Even after Max's passing, Jacob would often visit the station, standing quietly by the statue with a wistful smile. He knew Max's spirit was still there, watching over the place where he had spent so many years waiting for the reunion that would define his life. Max's story is one that resonates with us all, a reminder that true loyalty knows no time, no distance, and no barriers. It's a testament to the incredible bond between humans and animals, a bond built on trust, love, and devotion. For 10 years, Max waited. 10 long years of patience, hope, and unwavering belief in the return of the one person he loved more than anything in the world. And in the end, his loyalty was rewarded. In a world that often feels rushed and uncertain, stories like Max remind us of the power of connection, the kind that endures, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Max's faithfulness is something we can all aspire to, a shining example of the extraordinary love animals give us. So, the next time you're with your pet, think of Max. Hug them a little tighter. Tell them you love them. And if you're considering bringing a pet into your life, remember that these animals give us more than we could ever ask for. They give us their whole hearts, no matter the circumstances. If you've been touched by Max's story, consider adopting a dog or cat in need of a forever home. You never know. You might just find your own Max, loyal, loving, and waiting to give you everything they have. Thank you for listening. to Max's incredible journey of love and loyalty. If you're moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional animal tales that touch the heart.